Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Aquarius Rising Africa on Sunday evening. Well, evening for me. I know morning for a whole lot of you. Really, really great to have you all here. So appreciate you guys. I want to call it in the waiting room. I guess that's what it is. It's really awesome to see you guys and just the encouragement you have for Caleb. And I want to just say thank you so much because, yes, Caleb he's under a lot of stress when it comes to the shows and things, because often just before the show, he'll get a hit and then a lot of the PTSD actually sets in. Caleb, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us. And before we actually go ahead, I'd just like to ask you if you can open in prayer for us.
Sure. Heavenly Father, we come before you with open hearts and open hands, with gratefulness and gratitude. We just ask that you show us more of yourself through any words that are said here today, any information shared. And thank you so much for the sacrifice of your Son that made it possible for us to come before you with boldness. I ask that you stand with us all, especially as we head into these new dark days that are coming, days that are going to be darker than anything we've ever seen. Says that you stand with us, continue to provide our bread, continue to provide sustenance and safety and peace for us. And if it's time to take us home, take us home. And I said in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you for that. Wow. Okay. Well, for starters, I would just like to, again, just thank everybody. And, I'd just like to mention and thank those of you that have joined us in the dry fast. It really is amazing. And I'm getting a lot of comments, a lot of feedback, a lot of messages, emails and stuff about the fast. I want to just say again, this dry fast has been phenomenal for me. The breakthroughs I've had, and I think it's 5 weeks I've been doing it now, 5 or 6 weeks I've been doing it now. And that, as I said, was actually Caleb's initiative, so to speak. We were actually working with someone, the two of us, and Caleb does it in his own way. He'll tell you about it if he wants to. I've joined him on one of those days, on a Wednesday, dusk Tuesday till dusk Wednesday, on the dry fast. And wow, it's been phenomenal. It's not easy. The dry fast is not easy, but powerful. So, Caleb, I want to just say thank you for introducing us to that. And just more and more people are just talking about the fasting and how they're enjoying it. So, thank you, Stacey. Thank you, everybody. You're so cool, all of you. It's really beautiful to have you guys here. It's amazing. And I'd like us to maybe just, Caleb, start off with, we've had quite a few questions from last week. I know this has been this whole topic of crystals and soul gems and what we've touched on last week, the crystals in the body. I know it's opened up so many huge questions and answers for so many people. It's really great. So over to you. How are you doing? I know that you're having a bit of a rough time at the moment. Are you good?
Yeah, I wanted to kind of say something about that before we continue.
Sure.
I mentioned before that I struggle with PTSD. It's severe combat stress, and also from the SRA thing. So I get a double dose. And what it's caused, we'll show something next time around, a video of what happens to somebody who's been through combat. And it only hit me just a few years ago. It wasn't like this always. There was an event that triggered it. It hasn't stopped since then. It's just gotten worse. As I have tremors, like the worst possible tremors where I can't even hardly function. I don't know if you can hear it in my voice sometimes, but that it's definitely an issue. It makes it hard to do anything. I can't work. I'm almost scared to drive a car anymore because of it sometimes. So I don't like the medication I take to damp it down because it makes me tired, makes me sleepy. So kind of fogs my brain a little bit. But if you can hear it in my voice, that's what's happening. It's just a severe tremor. It used to only affect my left side. Now it's affecting both my left and my right. So if you guys could pray about that, lift that up in prayer. We'll show that video to you next week. Or Thursday, probably. We'll show it to you so you can see for yourself exactly what it's like for combat veterans. It's not fun. So nightmares are one thing, but when you have that shaking process, because it's just a delayed reaction to it, and it's a horrible thing to go through. It really is. It's a horrible thing. So appreciate your prayers for that.
And I think it's I just like to bring as well to viewers' attention. I've been speaking with you for quite a while off air, and I know what it's taken for you to come and share on the show. So huge appreciation for that as well. And there we are working with stuff with Caleb, and if he's open to sharing further down the line, he'll do that in terms of his PTSD and stuff like that. And in the meantime, just your prayers are hugely appreciated. Thank you so much. And especially just before the show, often what happens is that's when he will get hit. Is just before the show, often sometimes during the show. Great. Anyway, I was thinking, Caleb, some of the questions and stuff we had from last week about the crystals in the body, and I know that we're going to be moving further into the actual crystals, but I know there's still quite a bit of stuff that you want to speak to us about, how it relates to the body and stuff like that as well. Let's start talking about the appetite crystals, because there seems to be quite a few questions around that. Appetite being obviously the crystals in your teeth, right? So we were speaking about that on Thursday. We are at Sunday now, speaking about that on Thursday. So an appetite obviously means, sorry, what you're saying, and I'm just trying to grab something on my phone here, which someone sent me, and I want to actually just read this to you and get your take on it. And what you were saying was that obviously with all your teeth being appetite crystals, really, and that sort of magnifies. What's that? Yeah, magnifies, becomes louder. What's the word? Sorry, I've forgotten the word. Yeah. Resonate. Yes, exactly. So somebody sent me something, appetite, and this is actually from Thea. The appetite crystal stone meaning comes from the Greek word to deceive, which I find is very interesting. Owing its name to its unique properties, a combination of different levels of fluorine, chlorine, and hydroxide. The apatite crystal ranges in color from deep blue green to yellow to sometimes pink or violet. What's your take on that?
I know what the meaning was before. I didn't say anything about it last time because I don't want to cloud any issues with deception, but it's an interesting thing to bring up because of the story of Jacob. Jacob was called the supplanter or the liar. And then he became Israel later. So I kind of related to that story. It's a story of transformation. You get a new name, you become something different. So this body is fallen in a fallen state. You're born that way, which I absolutely agree with anybody that would say that's not fair to us. But if you understand how bloodlines work, that's how that goes. And once a decision is made in your past, it goes down through generation after generation. And if the original man fell, then everything about him is going to fall too. And they're going to become slaves to the things that made them fall. So as it relates to appetite, I do agree with the fact that it does resonate. and it can magnify anything that you say. And I think the question was also about, what if you lost your teeth, you had false teeth or whatever. I don't necessarily think that false teeth are a bad thing. You have to eat, right? But if you can maintain your own natural teeth, that'd be the best way to have it happen. That's not always possible. So it's like, I'm sure everybody's aware of the story of Paul handing out a prayer cloth. He'd pray over a prayer cloth and send it to somebody, and they'd get healed. That's just a point of contact, like I said last time, with the cleansing of your crystals. If you feel like you need to do this to increase your faith, and I'm all for it. But you don't need those teeth to speak truth or to speak power or to claim something over something else. The power lies in your spiritual mouth anyway. It's not in your physical mouth. Your physical mouth is just a loudspeaker.
Right. And the teeth are the appetite teeth are the amplifiers thereof. So if you're speaking truth, it amplifies that. And if you're speaking lies or deception, it amplifies that as well, right?
Right. It can. But again, it's a point of contact, and it's the way that you interact with this world here. So the important part is the spiritual part. That's where you really live, is there.
Right. Wow. How interesting. And fillings, that's actually interesting. You know, when we look at the Mercury, I know the it's not so much. I don't even know if dentists are doing Mercury fillings anymore. I'm sure they probably do. But in years gone by, Mercury was something that was obviously used a lot in the fillings. What's your take on that?
Well, they try to say it's an amalgamate and it's safe and whatever. If it was so safe, why years later are they recalling people back to the dentist to have it taken back out? Lots of people have had their fillings drilled back out.
Yeah, absolutely. The mercury, because we know mercury is poisonous to the body. I'm not wondering if that was kind of like a deliberate thing, though, right?
Oh, yeah, just like the top hat situation. Instead of making you wear a top hat, they just put it in your teeth this time. The generation before me, at least in my family, all had gold fillings. They didn't have mercury.
Wow. So the plebs, so to speak, right? Those of us who can't afford the gold fillings, we'll just go for mercury. And we just kind of get dumbed down even more with those mercury fillings. It's insane, really. I must say, I was actually quite annoyed this morning. I woke up this morning just being annoyed at the abuse against humanity, the abuse against our species. And the way that we've just been railroaded, it's horrific, actually. And then I see these creatures of the night stare. I don't know. Anyway, I was just annoyed at that. Anyway, so that was interesting. So I'm gonna just ask a few questions here, and you can decide. And this is just really coming off. I know we touched on a few topics last time, such as also like the churches, the steeples, hats, the pointy hats, stuff like that. Church steeples, mosques, etc. They're conductors of energy. Now we've heard that we've learned that. Those of you who've watched, I know Bryce and I did a thing on Tartaria maybe a year ago or something, and from that we've understood that all the churches, the mosques and things that have now been used to actually separate humanity, like the divide and conquer, and sort of separate us into different religious segments, actually were never ever intended to be that way from the beginning. They really were energy conductors of different types. What do you say about that?
Well, I liken it to, all of us have gone to a sporting event or something where we had to shout. We've had to yell or cheer. We didn't have to, but we wanted to. Wanted our voices to be heard. So we stuck our hands around our mouth like a funnel. You go a step further than that, and you have a megaphone, which is just a giant cone that amplifies your voice. So you take that concept and aim the cone at your head or your pineal gland, and whoever or whatever is talking to you is amplified. No, I'm not saying that for every situation, but definitely in terms of the dark people, that's what they use that for. That's what that is used for. And the Tartarian stuff is a whole different subject altogether, because that was more of a free energy thing. But I'm sure it also had to do a lot with spiritual energy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know I've been asked a lot about Tartaria as well, and I know we're going to get there one of these weeks. So fear not, there's lots of stuff that we have in store with Caleb's show. So very interesting. And then that, of course, if we can talk more about the hats, because we were speaking about the witches' hats, of course, and the pointiness, and obviously that being a bit of an antennae as well. Then we're looking at like fairy figures, fairy characters, hats at school, right? But I mean, I remember when I was at school, okay, we didn't wear hats to school, but I don't know, what do you, bashers, we call them a basher, like a flat straw type hat, no pointy or anything. What is your take on that, wearing hats to school, the characters? You look at the fairies and the gnomes, and I'm just trying to see, I've got fairies and things. And some of them certainly have the little pointy hats and things on. So my point, I guess, what I'm asking, not all of it is bad, right? So we know that these guys have taken God's gifts to us and inverted them, because the dark can't create. They literally emulate. They just know how to manipulate and destroy and use it for their own nefarious purposes. And they do it so well. But is that I want to just clarify that it's not always a bad thing. And that's where discernment comes in, right?
Well, in my experience, the only time I ever saw pointed hats or anything wasn't everyday life out here, other than the fact that they do manipulate the public. I'm sure they use a lot of those techniques. With what I was involved in, it was used as a magnification device, so that you could hear more clearly if you weren't able to hear as clearly as you think you could. I personally didn't need to wear anything like that because I was already sensitive, but some people who aren't as sensitive needed to wear those things. No, in terms of the school and everything else, I'm sure that that's probably something that they push as part of their agenda, because people are controlled whether they know it or not. There's always somebody behind the scenes, and they're always saying, don't pay attention to the man behind the curtain, like in The Wizard of Oz.
Wow.
They're always misdirecting from that kind of thing. And they always create the, quote, false flag effect, end quote. So they're misdirecting, and they're ducking and dodging what's actually going on with these kids and with people and everything else. People will buy an article of clothing and not even know that has pagan symbols or evil symbols or witchcraft symbols or. There's a whole bunch of ors involved there. Most people are just ignorant of it. So how would they know if they don't know?
In fact, yesterday I was walking around at our local market here, and there's a crowd that makes very cute clothing, right? They kind of tie-dye it and do their own thing. But of course, part of that is this cute little witches flying on broomsticks, and you have that on your T-shirt with their pointy hats. So are you saying to us that even stuff like that is potentially dangerous?
Well, I can refer to the Bible, what it says about some of that, where it says, love the sinner, but even hate the clothes stained by sin.
Okay.
It doesn't say to hate the sinner. It just says hate even the clothing stained by that. I think that's what that's talking about. I want to point out a comment from Duke. says they found these cylindrical hats made of gold in the ground in Germany. They have astrological symbols on them. They're very old. And yes, that is definitely what I'm referring to as that. If you can see that comment.
Yeah, they found these cylindrical hats made of gold in the ground in Germany. Wow, makes a lot of sense, right? But why astrological? Let's talk about the astrological stuff then.
Well, you just said it yourself. They take stuff and they twist it, they pervert it, they distort it, they trash it, they make it seem like it's something that was bad that came from God. God's the one that ordained these things in the first place. You'd have a hard time convincing me that the astrological signs are something that the enemy created, because he can't create. You'd have a hard time convincing me of that. And in fact, it was, quote, end quote, astrologers who discovered the birth of Jesus and who knew the truth about him in the first place. The three magi, the three magicians, the three mages, they were paying attention and they were watching those signs. They knew it was coming and they waited for the date for it to come, and they went and seen him and brought him gifts because they knew he was a great king that was promised to come. And they didn't read that in a book, they read that in the stars. So
yeah. And I think astrology is a very interesting topic that we can, again, also discuss at a later stage, because I think, like everything, I think astrology certainly is from the heavens, but it was never really meant to be used for human beings in the way that we've been using it, because that's when it became corrupted, right?
Right. It's not meant to tell you your fortune or to tell you that you're going to fall in love today. It wasn't never meant for that. It's a gigantic calendar on a massive scale. If you think about it, it foretells things and it portends things. Even the Bible says to look up. You'll see signs and wonders in the sky. It says that to you. So
yeah, very, very interesting. Wow. Someone has asked about speaking in tongues. What's your thought about people? I know in a lot of these charismatic churches, people are speaking in tongues. What's your feeling on that?
Having grown up in several different denominations as a youth, obviously facing abuse and everything, my viewpoint's kind of skewed on churches a little bit. I'll admit that freely. But from what I understood then, the jabbering gobbledygook that some people put out is not a real thing. It's more of an emotional high. Because as I understand the Bible to say, with tongues, there's also an interpretation. So someone speaks in a tongue, there's going to be somebody else who says what that meant. That's my personal belief on the thing. You get too many people like Benny Hinn and some of these others out there that are baby jabbering, or whatever you want to call it. I don't think that's real tongues. Right. I do think that it's a possibility, and we can definitely ask for that gift if you really want it. Have faith that you get it, and God will share that with you. But there's always order with what God does. There's not chaos. It's not just random chaos, ever.
Interesting. Someone has asked about ears ringing. Why do their ears ring? Now I know that could be, but they're talking more from a spiritual perspective. How do you feel about ears ringing? I mean, I'm not talking about having stuff in your ears or implants and stuff. What would the reason that someone's ears ring be? That someone's ears ring. Ears ring.
Well, again, me personally, my ears definitely ring because I was shooting a lot of guns. So there's why my ears ring. Lots of explosions and whatnot. Try shooting off a 850 round belt of 7.62 by 51, and you'll understand why my ears ring.
Yeah.
But for spiritual things, I know physiologically ear ringing, sometimes, if you don't have tinnitus to begin with, sometimes it relates to your blood pressure. So maybe something, you're being attacked by something that raises your blood pressure a bit.
Right. Something to check out then, actually.
Right.
Now, yes, something also. Sorry, did you want to say something more?
No.
Okay. Yes, something interesting as well. I'm not sure what your take is on this. Are the apatite crystals petrified pieces of teeth of some past biological creature? And is it the same for say, a slate vein? Was it an actual vein? Were these veins from creatures? If we look at the crystal caves in Egypt, the crystal cave in Egypt, it is obviously a petrified dragon. As it petrified, it turned to crystals. Is this the same for all crystals? Very interesting question, actually.
It is interesting because I have seen the mud fossil stuff. I stopped watching his stuff a while back. Some of it I just don't agree with, but I respect his research and what he's done to expose things like that. And as I sit here now, looking out the window where I'm living, I can see what looks like a giant sleeping on the side of a hill. It's not pareidolia. You can see this thing. I'll try to take a picture of it so you can see it. So I think some of that stuff did happen. You have fairy tales about trolls that got exposed to sunlight and they transformed into stone. So I believe that that's entirely possible. In my own experience with the deep underground, they had their own specific kind of light that was different than sunlight. So obviously they didn't turn into stone, but they were definitely not okay with UV light. They didn't like UV light. They'd stay away from it. So something with UV light doesn't agree with them. So
wow.
As far as
there's something
type being teeth or something else and whatnot, or crystal and blood or whatever, I really couldn't say because I never made that my area of study.
Right. I saw something very interesting the other day, and I think I mentioned it to you. They were talking about this Himalayan salt, the pink salt, that is actually petrified giant. It's coming from the body of petrified giants. What are you saying about that? Because if that's the case, I've been eating dead giants for more than a decade now. And that's quite scary.
You telling me that's actually the first time I've heard that. So I've been taking Himalayan salt for more than a decade. So we're both in the same boat. If you think about it, everything on this planet's been recycled one way or another. So I hear people talking about sacred burial grounds and this and that. It's like, you know what? Everywhere you walk is a sacred burial ground if you think about it.
Exactly. I've always said that. You know, it's just maybe the ones that we know of or the more recent ones. But as you say, I mean, where you are, I mean, you got it. I mean, anyone who's been to Namibia as well, you talk about the giants and things, that you go to a place called Moon Valley and Spitzkoppe. I mean, this is the place where the rock people live. I mean, there are rocks. You go there, you feel like a midget. These places are massive. And you see the lion, you see these faces, the gnomes. I mean, it's like the rock people. So how does one actually ascertain, you know? And obviously, as time, you know, over time, erosion takes place. So these rocks then become dust and sand or whatever, or they get mined, like we're talking about the giants now. So, you know, and now this big thing about Himalayan salt being petrified giants. So I don't know, you know, I think, where does one actually draw the line with stuff like this, right? I mean, how do we draw the line? I mean, you know, at the end of the day, because if we're going to take into account, or I think it's interesting to know, but I think we've also got to be wise as well to understand that everything we ingesting has been recycled anyway. You know, when we as humans die, whether we are cremated, whether we are buried, whether we are eaten by an animal, whether we leave our body. I mean, I know in Namibia or South Africa somewhere, there's this place where you can leave your body on the mountain for the vultures to consume. That's the way they like to be. So, yeah. So whatever it is, you know, we really are, I mean, we really are recycled in the earth, right? Earth is just one big recycling furnace. What do you say about that?
Well, like I mentioned in an earlier show, this place used to be a lot bigger than it is now by at least a third, maybe bigger. So I'm not really sure people have an idea of just how big this place is. It's considerably bigger than you think. And I challenge flat earthers with one thing, one word: atmosphere, not atmos flat.
Atmos flat?
You breathe in atmosphere, not atmos flat.
Okay. Makes a lot of sense. You know, it's incredible when you actually, we understand language, right? So when we start listening to our language, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, not breathing in atmosphere.
I respect their point of view. I do, but I also want my point of view to be respected too. In fact, I demand that from them. They expect my respect for their point of view. I don't naysay anybody. It's a topic of discussion, and I can only give to you what my experiences have been with all this. So if you think of it this way, if this place was 1/3 bigger than it is now and it just collapsed on itself, the release of the underground ocean, from what I understand of antediluvian world, there was no ocean back then. There was no sea. It was just land. So all that water went someplace into the atmosphere and from the atmosphere and onto the surface, and the surface collapsed under the weight of it. Like I said, like a broken eggshell. It's resting on top of each other.
Absolutely.
Plate tectonics does not describe that adequately. Just doesn't do it. It's too many incongruencies, too many inconsistencies. So,
wow.
I'm no geologist. Wow. I am somebody that does a lot of studying, and I'm relatively smart most of the time.
You're very smart. You're super smart. You're one of the smartest people I know. And I just want to put it out there, guys. This is one of the smartest guys I've ever in my life come across. Wow. And you know what I find amazing with you is that, and I've said it before, but you know, when you spend time speaking to someone like Caleb, and I'm privileged to be able to do that. I want to tell you, I really consider myself to be privileged to do that, because we know that you've never had a memory blocked of all of this. Caleb has gone into full-on combat, military combat, into these insane places that I know he's in one of the previous video recordings we've done. You know, he tells about some of the places he's been to, and I know for a fact that is just a smidgen of what's happened, and not a memory blocked. So it's like having to come back after all of that and deal with asses sometimes must be really, really frustrating. So I am so grateful that you are talking to us and sharing with us. So yeah, you're a smart guy, that's for sure. It's actually quite amazing. I'm just actually looking at brave too. I agree, very, very brave. And to have all of this information, it's amazing that you're sharing that. And again, thank you so much. It's amazing.
Well, sometimes when we went into that underworld, the underground, those caverns didn't just stop where we stopped. They kept going and going and going and going. And they kept getting deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, to the point where it was too dangerous for us to be there, because the atmosphere was bad. Atmosphere was bad.
Not atmos flat.
Right.
Wow.
So we've all heard of the abyss. So here's my personal take on that whole thing. I do think that they've occluded Antarctica and the North Pole because there is a toroidal shape. There would have to be to create this electromagnetic sphere that we have surrounding us, protecting us. It's almost a given that that's a fact. So I think it's a toroidal shape, to be honest with you. North and the South Pole for sure. It's like a magnet.
So we're not flat.
No, I wouldn't say so.
Okay. Well, I know that we're going to be going in. That's another topic we're going to be talking about later. And I know that's one of the first things that I asked you in our initial conversations, because I just also had conversations with, I think, the guy's Flat Earth Dave. I'd interviewed him. But I really, you know what fascinates me, and this is probably a little bit off the topic now, but about that whole thing is water. The whole thing about water will always find its resting place on a flat surface. Now, that for me is where the trick is, and I haven't quite made that connection about the water. I'm very honest with you. So I'm looking forward to going further into that and really figuring out. But it makes such sense, the whole egg shape and kind of like imploding, collapsing in on itself. It really, really makes a lot of sense. And I think that it's so exciting to be talking about these things, because it's like a whole new world is being exposed to us. I so now know why I've been born at this time, because this is the information that in my psyche, even as a teeny tiny kid, it's like I've been wrestling with it. No, it's not like that. It's not, that doesn't make sense. But no one I knew could ever give me any information. So I just spent my life being frustrated at people because they could never answer my questions. And this is really amazing. So it's putting all these pieces together, which is really, really cool. Anyway. Someone is asking about when we were going back to the breathing again, right? We were talking about the proper breathing in one of the previous questions, right, and how we breathe. So when someone was saying is when we sleep and dream, do our bodies go back into the natural breathing state? When we're born as babies, you look at how a baby breathes. That's the way we're meant to breathe. But we never, and honestly, I can say this from our time in India. When I spent time in India there, the kids in India are brought up completely different to the kids in the West. I mean, it's like when we're looking at for example, the Indian yogis. I mean, kids are immediately, they don't sit at tables and chairs the way that we do. From when they can learn to sit and talk or walk and what have you, they're sitting cross-legged on the floor in lotus position. So, or immediately their hips are open. Everything is flexed. The way they breathe, yoga teaches incredible breathing abilities, the proper breathing abilities, which people in the West are not taught at all. So, again, I do believe that we were never, somewhere along the line, our breath as well, which is the life, it's the chi, it's the prana, it's the life force, right? We've disconnected from that. So what has disconnected us from our proper way of breathing? And as this question is, when we're sleeping, do we go back into that natural breathing state that is really the way that we should be breathing?
Well, to bring something up that's interesting about that breathing whole thing, right and wrong at the same time, I guess. But anyway, think about when you cry. I mean, you have a serious heartache cry. What do? When you're crying?
Breathe.
At some point you go,
yeah.
Make that motion. That's to increase oxygen into your blood, and it's also to calm you. And if you have trouble sleeping, and I've learned this the hard way, I've had to do this myself, you can make that sound You feel kind of foolish at first to do it, but it'll calm you enough that you can actually go to sleep. Children do it, babies do it. They're the best teachers, which is kind of strange. Strange way to look at it. Babies being teaching to the adults, but they're in a pure form, pure state. So the way that they cry, the way that they sleep, I would have to agree that sleeping puts you into that breathing rhythm. That's why you have dreams. If you're sleeping in the right waveform, delta or even theta, if you get down into those lower waveforms, that's where your dreams come from. And I think that you do connect with the spirit there. If I was trained wrong, I wouldn't believe that. But that's how they trained us to do the astral travel, was by lucid dreaming. That's found in theta.
Wow. Yeah, makes sense. And to get there, as you say, I mean, it's like that crying, sobbing. Amazing. Sure. So all just have a good cry tonight and you'll sleep well.
At least do the quick intuition.
Yeah. Iron in crystals. Now that's actually very interesting as well, right? When we're looking at iron in crystals, we have iron in our blood, iron in our body, anemia, which is obviously lack of iron, and I used to suffer from that actually as a child. Can you speak to us on that? Just what's your take on that, the iron?
Well, I'm glad we're at least staying in alchemy still, because this is a tremendous alchemical subject to talk about. You have to understand some metallurgy and how the metals work. Most people don't realize that metals are actually crystalline in form, the way that they form their structures after they've been melted or forged or worked. Each method does something different to that metal and changes the crystalline form so that it's either stronger or more ductile or more load-bearing, or you can just keep going and going with it. And that is a fact. Iron's in our blood. You have to have it to be able to transfer oxygen into your system. Iron is a huge component of that. So it's strange to think about that you have crystals flowing through your veins, that you do. Some people have ice cubes flowing in their veins, but the rest of us have iron.
Right.
I studied something, a really dangerous star, one of the most dangerous stars in the entire universe. It's called a Magnetar. And a Magnetar, if you got within 1,000 light years of a Magnetar, it would literally suck the iron right out of your blood through your skin. All of it, instantly. So they talk about strange things that are out in the universe.
Why? Help me understand that, please.
It's called a Magnetar because it's super, super, super magnetic. It's such a magnetic pull that it would pull the blood right, or pull the iron right out of your blood through your skin. And any other metal that's ferrous.
There's just a comment from actually Duke again on the magnetite, which I'm just going to put up here. What about the magnetite in the brain? Every neuron has a tiny crystal at the center.
Right.
What do you say? Mm-hmm.
Again, it just points to the fact that your body's full of crystals. So to cleanse those, to answer another question is, again, I just pray over it. You know, I ask God to give you some discernment, some knowledge, or some wisdom, and pray over it, because your body's full of crystals. And if you're in a fallen state, then what do? Throw your body away? No, you try to cleanse it somehow. You ask God to cleanse it for you.
Yeah. And I truly believe that when we do that, our prayers are answered, because, I mean, even if it's not rectified in your body the next morning type thing, you will be guided and shown what to do, right?
Right. You'll know. Your conscience will tell you, because you have a conscience that tells you right from wrong. And if you ask God to specifically magnify that right or wrong for you, then he will. He'll show you. He's not into hiding things. The enemy will hide stuff from you. God will always show you.
And your prayers are answered.
It's not always a yes answer for things. Just remember that too. Just like with our kids, when we raised our kids, we didn't always tell them yes. There's plenty of times when I had to say no. My daughter didn't understand it at the time. But it was for her benefit. So we have to remember that too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's incredible. All the little things, you know, that we as parents, adults, kids don't really understand at the time. But as you say, when you're in the know, and then you can be discerning as a parent, as an adult, because it's obviously for the benefit of someone, and it's a betterment for the betterment of everyone. And I think that's really what we're having conversations about here. This is, you know, this whole awareness is what's giving us the knowledge. It's giving us the understanding. Thank you so much, Natasha. Appreciate you. In terms of, you know, what we need to know. I've got to tell you, in the time that I have also, and I want to just say this to the viewers as well, there are not many people I listen to, and you can ask my mother. My mother will tell you Chantelle doesn't listen to anyone. I remember the father of my son many, many years ago telling my mother, complaining like hell to my mother that I wouldn't listen to him. My mother said to him, but he's never going to listen to you. Chantelle only listens to a few people, and one of them is her father. That's true, and my mother as well. But you've given me such amazing, you would say one or two things to me which would resonate. And I would literally take that on and I would do it. And within an instant, when I say an instant, it could be that moment, it could be within a day, I would have the answer that I required. Whether it comes to me in a dream form, whether it comes to me just in a knowledge, I'll get an activation, if you will, and then the information is kind of given to me in increments. But I can truly say when we are willing and when we are open to receiving the changes that we need to make. I knew there was a couple of things in my house I had to get rid of, and I didn't want to. I was like avoiding it, you know, I was being stubborn. But the minute I did, things changed in a heartbeat. So I want to just say that with prayer, with the willingness to change, with a willingness to make a difference, with a willingness to let something go that is not serving you, you are you're opening yourself, your space, and those around you for something so much bigger and so much better. It's amazing. And that's why I think our viewers resonate with you on that as well, because thank you, Dragonfly. I appreciate you. Because when we start making the changes, and this is, I think, please speak to us on discernment, because I love the way you explain discernment. Because when we use our discernment, that's when change occurs. We might not understand it all in the moment, but God shows us what is right. So can you just speak to us on that word, discernment, please?
For me, discernment it's interesting because I was able to I had foresight to begin with, which again is a God-given gift that they just tried to use and corrupt. But discernment in terms of God and what he would give you as a gift, it's, let's see, trying to find a good way to describe it. You get a funny feeling in your stomach when something's not correct. Would be one of the ways you know about discernment. Stirring. And if you know anything about where your spirit is, it's not in your brain, it's in your heart area. That's where the bulk of your spirit resides. It's actually all through your whole body, but that's the bulk of it. And so it's gonna say something to you first. So that would be discernment on anything. So if you look at a book and it has negative stuff in it, or you find something that doesn't fit well with you, then that's discernment telling you, hey, there's something wrong here. You go to a dark, dangerous neighborhood and you don't feel comfortable. That's discernment thing. You should probably get the heck out of here, you know? So for me, that's how I would look at it.
Yeah. And I think it takes practice as well. You know, I mean, I think discernment for me is also intuition, but intuition is something that I think a lot of people, it's kind of a hit and a miss. So I would say it's what you feel and what you perceive, right? So there will be a feeling and a perception of something. And as the feeling and as the perception don't match, if it doesn't match, then there's something off. And that's where prayer comes in. And it's trust. It's really about learning how to trust God's voice and what is God's voice and what is not God's voice. And I think that is when you're willing. It takes humility, actually. Would you say that? Would you say it's about humility?
Yes.
Putting your ego to the side and the things that you think are right and the things that you've been taught in the past that might not be true. I mean, you might think they are, and it might have been 10 generations in your bloodline that have told you that's the right way, but it might not be. So you might be the one that's called to change things, right? So it's about trust, right? And learning to do things differently. Humility, being willing to learn and learn and listen to someone or something that is greater than you, right?
Correct. And also JJT181 said discernment takes time to develop in my experience. That's true. It's just like everything. You don't go down to the gym and start bench pressing 500 pounds on your first day. It takes a lot of work to get that far. You have to have the right diet. You have to drink enough water. You have to work at it to get to that point. So it's something you do have to practice.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So I think what's amazing here is that, it's all these little things, because I think what I'm hearing from you is that it's the willingness, it's the small things, the tiny things, the one step at a time. For me, what I've understood is just putting aside everything we've learned or we've thought we've known, and kind of like, in my situation, it's like having 3,000-piece puzzles all in one box, and taking that piece and taking the time to say, well, that goes there, that goes there. Let's just first separate that, and then we can see what we're truly working with, right? And then once we've understood what we're working with, then we can start putting the pieces together one teeny tiny bit at a time. Yeah.
Right. And at first, it's like you're stumbling around in a dark room with an uneven floor while you're wearing a blindfold and somebody's telling you the wrong directions. That's what it's like at first.
Yeah.
After a while, you learn how to navigate that room. You learn what's correct and what isn't, and you stop listening to the incorrect voice.
Right. Absolutely. Very interesting. Stacey, thank you so much. Really appreciate you guys for supporting the show. Means a lot. Really, it does. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm just wanting to look at any of the other questions here before we go on. I've kind of gone through the questions that we've had from last week, and I did want to touch on those as well. But I know that what you were saying, there are more stuff that we want to talk about the body before we actually go on to the crystals. Is there anything that you want to share with us in terms of that before we move on to actual crystals?
Okay, say that one more time.
What I was saying was that we've done all the questions. What you were saying to me earlier on was that you still had more stuff to talk about, the crystals in the body, preparing the body or understanding the body and our natural crystalline structure, if you will. Is there anything more you want to share with us around that? Are you good?
We can go on if you want to. I just wanted to make sure everybody understands the correlation from these crystals to our body and how they interact.
Okay.
There's definitely a way to link those two together. And that's whether you know it or not. So
okay. I'm just looking at some of the questions here. Do you cause the light of those caves that Caleb have to bring his own lights, or is there some other kind of light? What cave? I'm not sure what Duke's talking about here.
Deep underworld where we found those.
Oh, right. Okay. Going there. What is your response to that?
Well, in most of these tunnels and caves, there is bioluminescent fungus, moss, that kind of stuff. So that provided a really eerie light. It was really, really left you feeling unsettled because it's not a natural light that we're used to out here on the surface. When we got into the biggest of the caves that we ended up getting to, it didn't look like a star, but it was some kind of construct hanging in the cave or floating in the cave. It wasn't hanging, it was like floating. It wasn't like a chandelier. You could look right at it and not hurt your eyes. And it provided kind of a subdued, fluorescent looking light, kind of yellowish. And that light didn't reach every corner of that cave. It just reached where we were going, which is where that ship was. So I think it came from that ship.
Right.
And I've said before that those things are losing their glory because they're separated from heaven now, but they still have glory, which would be light. So think about that for a minute and let that soak in.
Wow. Someone asked if the firmament is a crystal. I'm just looking. Is the firmament crystal?
If you break it down to the smallest parts of it, yes, it is. Just about everything is crystal in some form or another, which is really strange to think, but that seems to be the case with everything that we keep discovering and finding out. Why would everything related to crystals resonate with us? Why would they use them for the soul trade if that wasn't true? You weren't able to link that.
All right. I'd be very interested to start talking about some of the crystals they're using for the soul trade. Is this the right time to get onto that conversation, or should we go onto that topic another day?
We can start it if you want to.
Mm-hmm. Oh, let me just actually see what other questions there are, if there's anything here. I'm trying to just pick up on the questions here because I know you guys have got some. Guys, thank you so much for all these stars tonight for Caleb. Really, really, really appreciate you guys so much. And I know Caleb does too. Yeah, what we're talking about, crystals or batteries. Are the crystals part of the type?
Interesting one.
Yeah.
Crystals or batteries thing, because they definitely use what I call soul gems. Some people have heard them called something different. Sometimes they call them Apache tears. So there's different names for these things that they trap these souls in. If you look at crystalline structure, it's almost always hexagonal on the inside. If you take a thin slice and look at it under an electron microscope, you can see its actual structure and how there's a positive and a negative pole inside that crystal, and it does vibrate. It does resonate at its own frequency. Like I said, is that not camp lighter, but cigarette lighter or just a lighter in general, it doesn't have a flint. You strike the crystal with something and put it under compression. It creates electricity or power. It makes that little spark. So when you entrap a soul, which we will talk about, I'm not going to teach it. Again, I want to tell everybody that I'm not here to teach anything, so I'm going to obscure some of it. But if you entrap a soul in a crystal, it's either cut or naturally formed in a certain way, like a lens, like a prism. I don't know if you guys understand how a prism works, that it bends light. Well, these things bend that soul into this crystal, and it actually compresses that crystalline form on the inside and releases power, its own power and the soul's power. That's how they're able to magnify. It's more like a magnifying glass than it is anything else. It's very complicated, actually. So,
I'm sure it's complicated, but brilliant at the same time. Who actually thought about this? Do we know? I mean, I'm just thinking, who is the first person who figured out you could do that? Or who are the first people who figured out you could do that to capture a soul in a crystal?
well, I'm sure that it came from the fallen angels. They're the ones that taught us all forms of magic. So,
Jeez. It's crazy. Okay, let me just see. So will you speak more on the planets in the universe? Yes, Robin, we will definitely. Just maybe not right now, but that is coming for sure. Okay, we'll get there. We just want to kind of stay with the crystals and the body and that sort of stuff this evening. I'm interested. When, let's say we buy crystals, let's say people have crystals in their homes, right? And you're unaware that there might be something in there. How do you get rid of that entity or energy? Is it as easy as washing it in salt water, right? Because that's a good way that we've been taught to clear crystals, running it under a tap of cold water, or water doesn't have to be cold, I guess, running it under water, just in your hands, or just sending light, whatever, visualizing that it's cleared. Do you need to break it? If a crystal breaks and shatters, what happens to the entity that might have been in that crystal? Can you tell us about that?
well, when I was a practitioner, we would burn them. We burn the crystal to make it fracture. That's how we used to release any souls that were left in there. We never reused the gem. It had a finite life and wasn't very long. So we just burned them to release whatever soul was in there. Now, as a believer now, I totally believe that you should pray over everything you touch, everything. I'd even say, I'd go so far as to say even stuff you buy brand new, because you don't know where it comes from.
Yeah.
And just have faith that God's going to cleanse it for you. That's the most effective way to do it, because he's the one that can release those things. He created us and them and the crystals. So he knows better than anybody else how to set things free. So
I fully agree. Rivka has actually asked a question that I was asking too. Can a soul be released from a crystal? When you're talking about burning them and releasing, what happens to that soul? Does it then go back, if the person is still alive, or does it go back to that person? If the person or the animal has died and their soul's entrapped in the crystal, does it go back to God? What happens to that soul once it's been released from the crystal?
I was pretty focused on what I was doing at the time in procuring more crystals, more power. So I didn't really care what happened to them at that point. So I would assume that both things happen. It goes back to the person if they're still alive, or if they've died, that it moves onto God or whatever they're going to.
Okay.
It's not, they couldn't take a believer's soul. Believers are protected. It's the ones who aren't protected that they can take.
That brings me to the question of animals, though. I mean, animals are, I know when we're looking at animal sacrifice and stuff like that, and I know that animal souls are also used in these things. Surely an animal is belonging to God. An animal should be naturally protected by God. What's your take?
Again, it goes back to the fall. Adam had sovereignty over this whole planet. So he was given the kingship of this place. And he turned that over to the fallen. He turned it over to them willingly. It wasn't for a bite of an apple. It was for knowledge. And so in doing so, he handed that sovereignty over to these fallen beings. So they become the owners of this place then, if only temporarily. I remember we talked about elementals a little bit before, and neither good nor bad, but it depends on who's giving them orders. You know what I mean?
Still
if
bites
anybody's
me
ever
there.
been under orders. So when I issued an order to my men, they didn't have a choice but to follow it. They signed on the dotted line, and they accepted the fact that that's what had to happen. And so they do it without question almost. They had a right to dissent if they wanted to, but if I gave it, especially if I said it is so ordered, they would have to do it.
Otherwise,
face some kind of punishment.
Someone is asking if there's, do you touch crystals, anything at this point? What is your take on crystal for you personally? I'd be interested to know that as well.
Well, it's just like everything. You have to be careful what you touch and who you shake hands with and who you brush against someplace, because they can transfer stuff to you in that quick instant. You have to have faith that God's protecting you, that you're safe, and just maintain your spiritual health, because if you don't know who's putting what on you.
Exactly. And that as long as you are a believer and you are protected by God, right, you're not going to be picky. And it's so interesting because I've even realized, you were saying everything you buy, even if it's brand new, because you don't know where it's coming from. I mean, nowadays, everything is coming from China. Most, if you just look at most of the clothing and stuff, it's coming from China, right? And
Right.
who knows what could be in there. So I think I went and I bought some groceries this afternoon, and I looked at the stuff and I said, okay, I better pray over you. That was actually quite interesting, because for the first time today, I prayed over my food that I bought.
You should do
I've
that
been
every
seeing,
time.
yeah. And it's just something we so take for granted, isn't it? We don't even think about, well, I can't say I've thought about that, put it that way. I've just taken for granted that we're okay, that we don't need to do that. And especially when we're realizing, and I know Jesse has spoken to us a lot in the past about what they're putting in our food. That literally,
Can you hold on for a second? Can you hold on?
Sure.
I gotta let the boys out here.
Okay, no problem. The boys are his dogs, by the way, so I'm just going to mute him. All right. What I was actually saying, I always actually pray when I eat, I must say, when I cook my food, and I love cooking. I don't cook a lot. I don't really get time, and I don't need to cook for anyone else other than myself. So, but generally when I'm cooking, I always love cooking, and I'm always like enjoying it, just the love, and I'm singing or whatever. That might not be a good thing though. But it's for me, cooking my food is a prayer. When I'm preparing my food in the morning, I'll make my lemon bomb, and I love making it. I love the taste of it. So just that whole action for me is a prayer. But it's more in terms of buying my groceries. What am I putting in my home, right? If I'm buying new clothing or something, I'll generally wash it first before I wear it anyway. But it's like, really, it's a case of actually praying over it and just asking for protection and light and what have you, which is something very, very interesting. So let me just see. I think that's super interesting that we do need to actually pray over everything that enters our home. It's amazing when we really drink distilled water if you're feeling weighed down. Yeah, water is really good. I always drink water. And I must say what I do, right? And that I learned from watching the Tartaria videos well, a couple of, maybe a year or so back now. I can't even remember. Time flies so much here. And realizing how powerful water has been. I mean, I always know how powerful water is, right? As a woman, 80% of your body consists of water, man slightly less, but nonetheless, and the water crystals are so important. So what I do, I play the Tibetan singing bowls, and I always, whenever I buy water, I'll put it in my canister, and I'll always give it a little 5-minute serenade with my singing bowls, just to make sure the water crystals are whole and wholesome, and whoever drinks water is just blessed with water. So when you're praying over your food, when you're cooking, I just think it's an amazing thing to do. Thank you, little bunny Fufu. I know you're new to the channel. I like your name, little bunny Fufu. I always have a good giggle at some of the names on YouTube and stuff like that. Caleb, I see you back. We were just talking about praying over the food and the stuff that you bring into your home. I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to say over that.
Well, just a good practice to get into. I mean, again, I don't want to be the harbinger of doom for all good things on this channel, but it pays to be aware, and it pays to know what you're dealing with in the first place. And that's what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to just show you there's a whole lot more to this world than you think. And most people are not even kind of aware of it. So.
I really think it's so beautiful, just what you're saying, because at the end of the day, it's all about faith, right? And it's just about prayer. I love praying anyway. I'm always praying. Even when I'm not praying, I'm praying. And I just think that's what it is, just to have that lovely connection with God, the Heavenly Father, the Holy Spirit, Jesus, whatever people relate to, you know. I just think it's such a wonderful thing to be able to do that. And Caleb, have you met any ETs? I'm sure you have.
That's an interesting subject all by itself. I was part of you've heard Jesse talk about the council. I actually held a seat in that council, and I did get to interact with different types of creatures out there. You might call them reptilian. I did have dealings with the Dominion in that sense, the elf people.
You've mentioned them before.
If you want to talk about ETs, that they definitely are not from here. So,
right. I know we're gonna speak more about that. Sorry, and what I actually meant to say just now as well, and I kind of forgot. We've also, since you mentioned Jesse, what Jesse has spoken about a lot in the past as well is, you know, going back to our food, that they literally are putting crushed kids into our food. That's kind of like how we also, and how we kind of consuming them. And that's why it's so important to always pray over your food as well, whether you cooking it or not. I think it's very important to realize. And she specifically mentions the sort of the more grainy, organic, natural ingredients, right? Do you know anything about that actually?
It's probably a better choice, just because, you know, especially if you grow it yourself, it's not GMO. I would hesitate to put anything modified into your body if I were you. But if you don't have a choice, you can have faith that God's going to protect you from whatever's in that food. The Bible even says that you can drink poison and not die. You can handle snakes and not die.
Yeah. Natasha, a great big no. Caleb was not Jesse's training partner. Definitely not. But Jesse has spoken about who her training partner was. So if you guys want to find that out, you should go and watch Jesse's shows. Caleb was not involved with Jesse at all. In fact, they've never met. Unless I'm wrong, Caleb. I don't believe you guys have met, right?
No, unless we're in a great big room full of people. We didn't see each other or something, but I never met her.
Yeah.
Not yet, anyway.
Yeah. Right. Wow. Just seeing the questions here. Sorry. Grind your bones, make my bread. People help with it. Okay, go. Okay. Well, I'm not sure if there's anything else, still, Caleb, from your side that you want to touch on tonight. I mean, I know we've kind of hit an hour on a bit now. How are you feeling?
I'm okay. If you want to keep going, we can.
All right. Just in terms of, can you expand on the ETs? I mean, I know that you've said you've met some of the elven people and stuff like that. Can you expand a little bit on that for us before we wind up?
Well, obviously, I had to travel to different libraries to read different books or to look for information that I was needing for practicing, for being a mage or being a magician, if you want to call me that. Not a witch, not a warlock. None of that. Those are actually insulting terms to mages. Don't ever call a mage any of that stuff, or he'll use something bad against you because we don't appreciate that. I don't care anymore, but I did at one time. And one of the librarians that I talked to, this is in the north part of where I was at. That was my area, was in the northern region. He was a reptilian. Just no two ways about it. He was a lizard. Not like a one crawling on the ground. He was up on feet. He didn't have a tail. If you guys watch Star Wars, he looked like Bosk, bounty hunter Bosk.
Wow.
Definitely not human. Not a hybrid that I know of. He was just a different kind of race. Really hard to understand when he talked. Really intelligent, really helpful for what I was doing. He was also the guardian of that library. You couldn't get in there unless you knew the way to get into it. So,
wow. You say they hate humans. Can you expand on that? Why do they hate us so much?
Again, it's because at some point we're going to replace them. Again, that's just my opinion of it. But it seems like that's what we're being pushed or ushered towards, is to replace what is going to be lost because of the fall.
Right. So they're a little bit jealous, in other words.
To put it mildly, yes. I guess it'd be jealousy, but more of, I guess that'd be exactly it, is jealousy, because they consider themselves the elder race. We're just the new kids on the block, basically.
I heard, I was reading actually or watching something that for some reason, they, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, they used to be here and then they left and they went somewhere else. And then when they wanted to return, Earth was inhabited by unicorns and humans, and they did not like that. Is that true?
I've never heard that, actually. So,
okay. You know what I think is interesting is that for me, it makes a lot of sense that we have a consciousness, like these guys that are really ruling and controlling planet Earth right now. We have the ability to manifest. These guys can't manifest, but what they do is they will show us what they want. It's like the whole thing where energy goes, where attention goes, where energy flows, where attention goes. Energy flows where attention goes. So this is why when we're looking at a lot, for example, at The Simpsons, right? I always forget the one where they swear so much. That cartoon, South Park. It's like and now we know also, like they've done this in these programs. They've made kids look at probable outcomes. So they put this stuff futuristically in these cartoons. So when we see, for example, oh, Trump's going to be president, oh, the Queen's dying then, it's subliminal programming. So they make us see that, and we, through our consciousness, are creating it for them. What do you say about that? They don't know how to manifest. We as humans are. We master manifestors. That's one thing we can do. We are absolute brilliant creators, right? Our consciousness is able to create, but we are still babies compared to them. And it's true. So we like young still. That's why I say it's not so much that humans are dumb. It's just that we babies compared to them. And it's like Big Brother coming here, and little brothers and sisters are born, and they are bullying us into making us do what they want. Is that pretty much on the right track where I am there?
Well, young being a relative term, because you have to remember when all this happened, before Adam fell, there was no time. They were outside of time. They're in eternity. So there was no 3 hours from now this is going to happen. No, it was all happening in its own time, again, lack of a better term. But once we became slaves to time, and I think that's the curse of death, is being a slave to time.
Right.
Every single piece of you is a slave to time, physically speaking. Your body will die at some point because it'll run out of time.
Right.
And elder race is, again, a relative term, because in eternity there's no time. So you have to think of it that way. You can't think of it in terms of human thinking. But with the control that they put on us, you're almost exactly hitting the nail on the head, because it's like a marionette. You know what a marionette is. You're being controlled that way. It's mostly them enforcing their will on you. Most of that is getting you to agree with them, ignorantly or not. So think of it in those kinds of terms, and you understand what they're trying to do. And by replacement, I mean what's lost from the fall. They're going to go to whatever they're going to go to, which is oblivion. Even they know that. They'll tell you that that's where they're headed to. And we're going to step into God's kingdom. So,
right.
I see an interesting question I'd like to answer if I can.
Sure.
It's from Natasha Mawini about Genesis in the Bible. It says, when the earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep. What happened to make it that way? Angelic war? That's exactly what happened. It was a war on a cosmic scale. There was a resistance. And we don't really know how long that went on for. It didn't last for 1 hour. It didn't last for a day. Who knows how long that lasted? They don't really say. It's just alluded to a little bit. But that's exactly what happened. And there's evidence everywhere throughout our whole solar system, and even in our star system itself, the surrounding stars around us. From what I understood, dragons control stars. There's a dragon at the core of every star that regulates that star and how it behaves and what happens with it. So look at how many stars are out there. Imagine 1/3 of all those stars, 1/3 of them went to the dark side, went bad. That is an awful lot of beings out there. There's an awful lot of that's a tremendous battlefield if you think of it that way. You have to think bigger than just as a human being. You have to think on a grand scale. It's hard to wrap your mind around it. When you see them looking at, let's say, Mars, for example, they see structures, and they of course they try to make up a story about it, and it's not this and it's not that. Structures on the moon, they can't explain how the moon is with us. They can't explain what it's made of. They can't explain why it rings like a bell when they blow stuff up on it. They can't explain how they got so covered with craters or what it's about. They can't explain Venus. They can't explain how Uranus got turned on its side. They can't explain what looks like a Death Star circling around Mars with giant, look like gun towers. They can't explain any of these things. So they try to science us out. Science is a religion of its own. And kind of answer some of there was a question about the periodic table too. We only know what's here, what we can directly deal with. We don't know everything that's out there. There's, like I said, there's some fantastic things that I've seen. There's not just a couple gates you can go through. There's 48 of them. There's an awful lot of places that you could go. And once you get to that level, once you get to that power, you can understand why I wasn't hesitating to use soul gems to power what I was doing, because I wanted to go see, and I did often. So think of it that way. You have to think bigger than here. Most people can't even think bigger than their front yard. They don't realize that they live in a massive country that's thousands and thousands of square miles. They don't realize that this planet is far bigger than they realize. I mean, far bigger. I've driven across America 4 or 5 times in a few years period of time on the run. And I was sick of driving by the end of the first day, and I still had 4 days to go. So that's at 80 miles an hour. Take yourself back to the 1800s, and people were riding horses or just walking. Imagine the vast distances they had to cover then at 20 miles an hour or less. So just think of it that way. Think on a cosmic scale. That's my way of saying don't put God in a box. He's
Exactly.
bigger than all of this stuff.
Absolutely. Nourished, I'm going to say yes to that. That definitely the political realm has been corrupted by these guys. Are there good dragons? Are there still dragons on Earth? Yes, I'm going to say that there are. Are there good dragons? I believe there are. What do you say about that, Caleb?
I'd say there's good and neutral as well as evil.
Yeah. Does Caleb think we've been to the... Sorry?
There's a great cloud of witnesses that's watching us. Like I said before, at some point they're going to have to make a decision.
Yeah, and that's what you were saying, and I know on some of our previous conversations that's why stuff like nature spirits, tree sprites and stuff, you don't know. Those guys have not made a decision as to which side they're going yet. They could go either way. So I wouldn't, and I mean, we know that they are quite mischievous and quite tricksterish. So it's better to stay away from that, actually. Interesting question, which has come up on a lot of people's, comes up a lot lately. Have we been to the moon? Did we actually land on the moon 6 times?
I think the Nazis landed there way before we did.
So the moon is something that man has gone to, despite all the crazy evidence or all the stuff people are saying that human beings have never been to the moon. NASA has never been to the moon.
Well, if you can look past what they try to project on the sky to us to make us see what they want us to see, if you look past that, back before they had the technology to do such a thing, there's an awful lot of footage of structures made of crystal, obviously, buildings. They see craft coming and going from there. So who's to say that we didn't go to the moon? Again, you have to think bigger. You have to step outside of what you think you know here and realize there's a whole lot more to this. A whole lot more.
Absolutely. Much more. Thank you, Linda. So appreciate you. Wow, interesting. I know there was a picture which I must say I posted that I thought was quite amusing. These guys had been to the moon for I don't know how long, and they came back all like short back and sides though. I'm like, okay, guys, you've just arrived back from the moon. Shouldn't your hair be a little bit bushy? Right?
When I was serving in the military and we were operating in different countries, we're out in the middle of nowhere in the deepest, darkest jungle. And a guy would appear, a CIA man would appear in a pink polo shirt with shorts and golf shoes on and talk to us. And then disappear. We don't know where he came from, how he got there, or where he went. That was our contact, though. It was one of the strangest things I ever seen. I know how he did it because he was using portals. He was able to cast portals. But to have that happen, you're laying in water up to your chin, laying down, trying to watch something happen, and there's all kinds of critters and creatures around you. You're listening to the jungle because the jungle will tell you what's out there. If it goes quiet, there's something moving there. And so you're always paying attention to that. And this guy in a pink polo shirt and shorts and golf shoes just show up and tell you something. We need you to go over here, and he hand you some paperwork. It's like, where the hell where do they come from? You know, that's what my guys would say to me. And say, well, it's none of our business. Let's not pay attention to that. Let's keep on doing what we're doing.
Well, I can imagine the crazy stuff you guys must have seen there. I mean, I've asked you in the past, actually, I said, like, when you guys go on these missions, and you're not Men in Black, right? Where your mind has now been wiped. I mean, what do you say to each other after you've seen these things? Like, if you've been hunting giants and things and seen this crazy stuff. No, but seriously, because, I mean, I know that here in South Africa as well, I mean, guys that were in the bush war and stuff like that, they would go at night after they've done whatever, and they would sit and just drink in pubs, right? So alcohol became a huge crutch, and I think that is still a huge crutch for a lot of people. Thank you, the comeback, appreciate you. Like, seriously, how do you guys actually reconcile in your mind this? Okay, like the CIA guy, as you say, arriving there in his pink polo shirt. Yes, I can understand they travel through portals. That's not even something very strange for me anymore. So I guess that would be. But some of the biggest stuff that you guys have been through, like the fighting and the things you've seen, how do you actually reconcile that? Do you sit and talk about it afterwards? I mean, do you kind of debrief? Do you debrief with each other on what you've seen? Thank you, Natasha. So appreciate you.
Well, for the most part, we were really into our familial situations. Some of them were married. Most of us weren't. And you actually don't talk about it. You just go back home. And it's hard to readjust to that reality. You come from the craziest and hairiest situation you can imagine. People trying to kill you, and you have to kill people, and you're doing things you don't necessarily agree with, what you're doing it because that's your duty to do it. So you have to try to reconcile that with yourself for sure. But we didn't sit there and have trading cards talking about our experiences. You know, most of us would go on to move on to become those spooks. That's what we called them, as spooks. We would go on to become those spooks as we shifted off into different areas of service, I'll call it. So eventually, I didn't wear camouflage clothing or anything else. I wore well, you've seen the picture of me. I'm not going to share that here, but you've seen what I look like. Other than the rifle, it looks like I'm just going hiking. You know, I knew that it didn't matter if somebody saw me or not because I could just disappear at will, basically. So, blue jeans, a baseball hat, and a Carhartt jacket. That's what I'd wear.
Wow. Just a last question here, and I'm not sure what this is. Simona Magnus, what do you think of St. James Way in Spain? Me and my kids have had the most interesting energetic God experience walking it. Do you know St. James Way in Spain?
I don't. The only energy vortexes that I've been to was in Florida at Ponce de Leon, where they say that the Fountain of Youth is. And then there's one in South America down in Valparaiso, Chile. We'll talk about that adventure at a different time. But I've heard of a big one in Namibia, which I'd love to go see at some point, because they have these holes that looked like they were drilled. It's actually part of a massive energy grid right there that was pulling the, I'll call it Tesla energy out of the air. It has to do with the soil and the rock composition and whatnot there. So I'd heard about that, but every time I'd ever been to Africa, it wasn't for adventurous studies of magic. It was for work, let's say.
Well, I won't ask you what kind of work that is because I can only assume it had to do with the military, right? Or military. Mm-hmm. Now, like Namibia is...
Some of these things are not public knowledge, so I can't. Yeah, I won't disclose about some of that stuff. What is public, I will be able to say.
Absolutely. And just on the topic of Namibia, it's very interesting because I was doing an arrow drop on Friday, talking about Oprah and her shenanigans here in Africa, South Africa, and of course Angelina Jolie, who loves Namibia. I mean, Namibia is my heart. I got to tell you that much. That country is something else. So yeah, I would definitely invite you to Africa, and definitely take you to Namibia. That would be the first place we'd go. And you can see, or at least go close to those places, because I know the people who would be able to get us there. But it's very interesting because Angelina Jolie has definitely got a clause into Namibia, because Namibia is definitely, I mean, if you're looking at the Moon Valley, and that place looks exactly like the moon. I got to tell you, you walk in there, it's like you're on the moon. It's insane. It forms part of Earth's original crust. That's what they're saying. So we're going back that ancient. That's how ancient it is. And her child, Shiloh, was born there. Now we know as well that these people don't just have their kids born in strange African third world countries for no reason. So there's a reason that that child was born there, in my opinion. But it's just interesting that you should mention Namibia and those portals, shall we call it that?
Right.
Anyway,
that was from what I understand. That was part of Earth's original power grid. Is that place in Namibia? So
it's powerful, guys. I want to tell you that place is incredible. You know, I've taken a number of road trips to Namibia. South Africa is powerful. South Africa is beautiful. But I work in Namibia a lot. I've been working there for 20 years, going there 2-3 times a year for 6 weeks at a time. I was probably in fact, I know I was the first healer going there. And it was just incredible, the people, the country, and I've just gotten to know it so well over the years. And just every year I go back and just see how it's changed. And I see how the Chinese are getting in there and raping and pillaging, and the mining that's going on in there. It's just insane. It's horrible, actually, to see how that country is being mauled right now. But it's very, very beautiful. So it'll be interesting to see what comes up there. Anyway, great, guys. I think I'm going to let Caleb go right now. I'm not sure if there's anything, Caleb, that you would just like to say in ending off, if there's something you want to finish off with before you end off for us in prayer.
Just one last thing about the energy vortex in Florida. That's Ponce de Leon, Florida. There's an awful lot of people who are into magic with a K. They go to that place just because it's a spot where the veil is really thin. Lots of people see mer people. They see all kinds of stuff down there. So it's an interesting place. If anybody lives close to that, it's worth taking a look at if you're in that area. It's in the Florida Panhandle. So just pray before you go, because you don't know what you're going to encounter always. So
yeah, and when you pray, you're protected, and especially when you believe. You know, prayer comes with belief, faith, belief, all of that. So yeah, great. I want to just see. I hope we've covered most of your questions tonight. I will go through the questions again And Caleb will be back with us again on Thursday. So I hope you guys are going to be joining us again then. Yeah, thank you, Caleb. Wow, what a beautiful gift you are to little Team Africa. Told you all, don't ever underestimate Team Africa. Will you close us in prayer, please?
Sure. Also wanted to say, too, this seems a little disjointed right now, but give it time. This will all start to make more sense as we go along.
Oh, yeah. It already does. A lot.
All right. Ready? Heavenly Father, again, we thank you for being you. Thank you for your majestic glory that covers this darkness, and that you are going to overcome all of these things you already have. But you're going to show us how you do it. Help us to learn from you more and more every day. We're just children. We need your guidance. We need to be able to trust you. We need your healing. We need your sustenance. We need everything about you. We need your love. We also need to learn how to love you back. That's the nature of a family, to love each other. You're the ultimate family for us. We thank you again for the sacrifice that your son Jesus made for us, for the covering of blood that protects us, and for the Holy Spirit that you sent as our friend. Thank you so much for this learning stuff and disclosing things and talking about things. People need to be aware because they're not ready for this. They need to be even a little bit ready. So I ask that you continue to guide us, continue to show us the way, and just be with us in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. Wow. Thank you, Caleb. And thank you so much to everyone who's watching and supporting, and to amazing people that have donated for Caleb tonight. That is Natasha, Dragonfly, Stacy, Robin, Aaron's Energy, Linda, The Comeback, and again, Natasha. I think I said that unless there was twice. Also, I get asked a lot during the week as well in the comments where someone can donate to who hasn't been able to put on a star. In the description is my PayPal number, my PayPal, as well as buy us a coffee. You're welcome to go onto either of those links. They come through to my PayPal, and everything that I receive goes straight to Caleb. And we really appreciate your support on that, really. And Caleb, thank you for just giving so freely and so generously to our channel. I know you love humanity more than anything. I really know you know that. I know that about you because I've spent a lot of time talking to you, and I know that it's your greatest love to be able to sharing this information with our people and preparing us and just getting us armored up spiritually, what you've seen. And, you know, this is not something that you've read about or kind of concocted in your mind. This is stuff you've experienced. This is stuff you've experienced firsthand. You've had amazing interactions with incredible beings in light and in dark. And I'm just so grateful that you're choosing to share with us. Can't tell you how much. So I want to just say thank you for that. Really appreciate you.
Cool. God preserve me for such a time as this. That's all I can say.
And I'm just so happy it's with us. Definitely. Wow. Okay, guys. Thank you so much. God bless you all. And we'll see you. I'll see you tomorrow. And we've got a full week again. Double dose Jesse on Wednesday as well. Caleb back on Thursday as well as Sunday. There is a program schedule up in the community section of the channel. So thank you for supporting. Take good care.